Welcome back to all of our listeners. It's so good to be back. And we're excited because this is actually our first time in a long time that it's just me and Lauren here today. And it's our first time just the two of us recording a video call on video. So this is kind of fun and exciting. So today we're going to be talking about healthy commitment and toxic loyalty. So what are the difference between having toxic loyalty and healthy commitment? Because sometimes when we have toxic loyalty, we actually think it's healthy commitment. And we want to kind of help you guys talk through some of the characteristics that differentiate those things, and also how we fall into toxic loyalty without even knowing it. Without even wanting it sometimes. So that's today's topic. And so we're going to jump in.
Yeah, we are. It is good to be back in this casual, haven't planned for hours what we're saying, what we're talking about. When we finished the webinar series on Finding Your Way Back, that took a lot of work and preparation. And now we're just back to our just let's talk about this. This matters. We have a lot of experience and insight into this, but we don't have this scripted conversation. We're just going to go for it. And there's something really fun about the energy of that. And I do love your mustard yellow shirt. I'm not sure you can see it on the video, actually. Luke hasn't ever had a mustard yellow shirt, right? I mean,
no,
this is big. This feels big.
Not if you haven't bought me a yellow mustard shirt before, because I don't buy clothes.
No, you really don't. I think I started that when we were teenagers. I literally was just like, oh, this shirt would be so cute on you. And you're like,
Okay.
do you like it? And you're like, I don't know. Do you like it?
You like it. As long as my girlfriend or wife likes it. Well, girlfriend then, wife now likes it.
You didn't have a girlfriend and wife at the same time.
Nope.
That's good. Yeah, such an Enneagram 9, just so going with the flow. But you have mustard yellow on, and I don't think the video, it almost looks brown. So I feel like this needs to be remembered today.
Okay.
I'm so proud of you branching out and wearing. You had like salmon pink on last week.
Yeah. That's another. You also bought that because you buy my shirts.
It's true. So basically, any color I buy you, you're gonna wear. Wow.
As long as you say it looks good on me.
Wow.
Yeah.
You trust me a lot.
I do.
Is that toxic loyalty?
Or is it just healthy commitment? Let's dive in now and find out.
Okay. So we did put together some characteristics of each of those two different systems, two different ways of relationships. So we'll start with healthy commitment, because it's always good to start with the right one and then contrast it with the one that's different. So healthy commitment would consist of things like having autonomy and choice to stay, choice to go, choice to be in the relationship. Individuation, the two parties are separate. They're connected, they're interdependent, but they're separate. And they have separate desires, separate needs, separate opinions, lots of separateness while being together in a relationship. And this can be friendships, this can be work relationships, marriage relationships. These two elements could be in any type of relationship, essentially. Okay, so then having agency, being able to have boundaries and have boundaries respecting the other person's boundaries. These are all characteristics of healthy commitment. Reciprocity, we're going to talk a lot about reciprocity today, because it's a key characteristic that is in healthy commitment that is not in toxic loyalty. And then there isn't going to be, the pattern is important with healthy commitment. It's not going to be a perfect relationship. It's not going to be consistently healthy, but the patterns of engagement are towards the healthy commitment side and not the toxic loyalty side.
Right. Now, I remember if you mentioned this one, but just like that difference of opinions. I think you said something about having a different opinion or being able to share things and see things differently. and it being okay. Like not liking a mustard shirt. Just kidding.
So do you not like your mustard shirt?
I do.
Okay.
But that just like that, not having to have a same opinion on everything. So there's, again, I think you said something about that, but that's really important in a healthy commitment or a healthy relationship. Is the commitment isn't dependent on whether you agree with me or not, or whether you think like me or not. I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we see that as a strong driving force in toxic loyalty.
Right, right. And the discomfort of difference drives people to demand sameness,
Right.
which is so toxic in a relationship, to demand, essentially to demand anything. Everything you bring to the table in a relationship needs to be willing and needs to be choice driven,
Right. Yep.
not coercively driven. I love that. I mean, I also hate it. The other side of it. So should I talk about toxic loyalty?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So some characteristics of toxic loyalty would be codependency, which we'll talk about in more detail soon. Enmeshment, which is similar to codependency. Coercive conditioning. So a good friend of ours, she introduced us to this term. You probably heard the term trauma bond, which is like a closeness that's come through trauma, typically from one person to another. However, coercive conditioning is a better way to describe this, because the person is responding with this loyalty, with this, I have to be here, I have to do this, I have to care for them, I have to enable them, I have to. That's because they've been coercively conditioned to that system, whether it be in a marriage, in a faith system, politically. They've been conditioned to think, oh, I have to be loyal no matter what. And it creates a closeness, but it's all built on the coerciveness of the relationship. It's not a genuine, safe closeness.
And would you agree that like a lot of times there's a power differential of the coercions happening with the people in power, and so the people without the power, in order to be accepted or included, or not alienated, then you have to agree to these sets of beliefs, and as long as you do, then you can be within this, which also probably is a attachment relationship there.
Totally.
If you have an insecure attachment, you're going to want to find security, acceptance, inclusion in any community.
Right.
And it helps that, okay, if I agree with, let's say like 60% of something, I get into that group, and then there's that coercive conditioning that maybe takes us that rest of that way.
That's a good point.
Because like a lot of that is autonomic, like with attachment. If I don't, whether we're conscious of it, we know based on experience and watching what happens to people who don't stay in line.
Right.
And if we don't stay in line, then we get embarrassed, alienated, used as an example. We don't want that. That doesn't create safety for our bodies of trauma, attachment. And so we step in line. And also with attachment, we have probably practiced that from our relationships with our parents. Like, you have a choice: have a voice, don't have a relationship; have a relationship, but don't have a voice. And when a lot of times we see this, like you said, whether it's politically, spiritually, family, friends, jobs, we see what happens to people who don't walk that line.
Yeah. Yep.
And that activates that attachment part and says, oh, I remember this. Our bodies jump into survival mode and say, we
Mhm.
know what we need to stay safe.
Which highlights the exploitation of people in positions of power, exploiting those genuine needs that humans have to have
Right.
purpose, to have belonging, to have
Yeah.
meaning within a group of a social circle.
Hmm.
And they might not even know this consciously, but that's what they're exploiting. They might not know the psychology behind it, but
Right.
when you when you create a system where there has to be agreement and sameness and loyalty, you're playing on those needs that you're explaining that people have to have a healthy to be attached to people, to belong, to be
Right.
connected. And so it highlights even more the exploitation of systems that where toxic loyalty lies.
Yeah. And whether they know they're playing on that, they're still responsible for that dynamic.
Absolutely.
And where we see a lot of toxic loyalty also is where emotional health is minimized.
Right.
And
For
so
sure.
that, and again, whether it's intentional or not, why is that? Because when there's emotional health, when there's healthy commitment, where individuation is encouraged, where fluidity of thought is encouraged, where questions are encouraged, what happens when somebody comes into a toxic a system that requires toxic loyalty? They get exposed, they get challenged. Whether it's the leader gets exposed, the system gets exposed, the thought, the way of thinking gets exposed. And an unhealthy system can't risk being exposed. And so how do you stop a system, a broken system, an unhealthy system from being exposed? Get rid of the people that challenge it, minimize or defame the process, the tools that encourage people to heal, to think.
Grow. Yeah.
And then if you get rid of those things, so I want to be accepted. Well, I don't feel safe. Well, safety is, well, in the toxic loyalty systems, like safety is a feeling, it's an experience that is dependent on you, and you can't trust yourself because the bigger system is more important. You're not more important than the system is.
Right.
Because there's a bigger goal, desire to achieve something than your safety. And safety is also mental health. So therefore it's negated. And if the system that says safety is good is wonky, is not scientific, is...
You mean if they're portraying it as that?
Right. If they're portraying it as that and teaching it as that.
No, too scientific, I think, would be what they'd say.
Some systems would say too scientific.
Yeah.
And some systems would say,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like maybe a religious system would say that's too scientific. Other systems would say that's too like soft,
Emotion-based or
emotion-based.
Yeah.
And so if you're being pulled to that, but their teaching is it's wrong, it's not accurate, it's not scientific enough, or it's too scientific and it's too humanistic, then we're like, oh, I don't want to be like that.
Right.
So it must be I have to ignore these feelings.
Yes.
And that's where that conditioning happens, that the conditioning happens of you have to align to this, so therefore you have to throw out that.
And that's where censorship comes in, and oh, we're gonna give you the books to listen to, the music, or the books to read, the music to
Yeah.
listen to, the people to be around, the people that you deem intelligent, and all the other ones are deemed stupid. You know, there's these ways of othering
Right.
that these systems, including down to the small family system, creates by the culture of the system to, like you're saying, invalidate everything else besides the system.
Yeah.
And it's
That-
effective. It's very, very
so
effective.
effective. I've even heard people say, like, you can't think that way. That's wrong, or that's stupid. Like, that's not intelligent to think that way.
Right.
Because people who think that way, they don't understand this, this, and this. Well, I don't want to be stupid.
Right.
So I can't think that way. Or this person who we respect thinks this way, so must be I have to think that way also.
Yeah, totally. So this kind of brings to the thing we wanted to talk about, of the trauma before the trauma. When you had brought up attachment, so often traumas later in life we were primed for by traumas earlier in life.
Right.
And so the trauma before the trauma, why don't you explore, like, what is the trauma before the trauma often, in a general sense, that sets someone up to be vulnerable, to be in a system that requires their toxic loyalty.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it even a little bit already, of that a child be giving that choice of either basically choose the system, the family system, the happiness of mom or dad, and get rid of those questions, those gut feelings, those emotions. Like, what? Well, when you said that, mom, you hurt me. You can't say that, because then mom will be upset. So the system is more important than how you feel, or how what we said to you made you feel. So that's the trauma. So that's the experience of, I have to abide by the rules, spoken and unspoken, in order to be accepted into this toxic loyalty. I can't challenge the family system of how we handle conflict. And as a 3-year-old, you're not thinking challenging, but as you become like a 15-year-old, maybe you're like, hey, this isn't right. But you've already been conditioned that you know what happens if you challenge it. And so that's the trauma before the trauma. Or there's spiritual abuse. You go to church every Sunday, and what are you told? You're told a certain teaching, and this is right. This is, the Bible teaches this. And so therefore you have to accept this, because if you don't, what does that mean? That means you don't trust God. That means you don't trust the pastor. That means your faith is weak, and you can't have a weak faith. And so you have that toxic loyalty is, you have to believe what is being taught to you, because if you don't, these are the consequences. And so fear is used a lot. Fear relationally, community-wise, or like religious situations, it's even eternity. Politically, it's the people who are like you, the people you are connected with, the people you have similarities with, the people you have similar experiences with. If you don't agree with us, then you are no longer accepted. That could be a bigger system, family system, even religious system. So some of these traumas are, or the traumas before the traumas, I've seen what happened to other people, and it has created fear within me. So I've had to adapt to make sure that I find safety as a kid, where I don't have power. But as you become an adult, you feel the same experience. So it's not like, if that trauma has not been healed, if you haven't found safety, if it hasn't been confronted, then you're still, as an adult, still feeling powerless and hopeless to the system, and feeling like you can't challenge it. And so you're stuck, you're powerless, you have no agency, and the risk of community and relationship is there.
Totally.
Does that explain, do you think that explains the trauma before the trauma?
Yeah, I think so. Yep. and we talk more about attachment in several other episodes, because really, like you said earlier, it's like attachment wounds, our insecure attachments drive all of this. And those are
Right.
formed in the first couple years of life. So
2 to 3 years. Yep.
yeah. I'm thinking of how you've already kind of mentioned this, but if the group is the same, it's more likely, if there's toxic loyalty, it's more likely there's a homogeneous group. So the group is the same in either how they look, in the type of circle they're in, whether, whatever demographic, whether it's a political circle or a certain type of thought or a certain type of religion. If there is the sameness in the group, there's much more fertile ground for this toxic loyalty to grow,
Absolutely.
fester, and really trap people.
Right. Because if it's not homogeneous, then there is different experiences, different perspectives, and it's hard to have toxic loyalty when people aren't willing to give up their experience. Like living overseas gives us an understanding of not just Thai people, but the European people that we meet here in Thailand. The other Americans from the West Coast, from the East Coast, from the South, the Midwest.
Korean people, Burmese
Korean,
people,
Japanese, like
Chinese people, Australians. It's like, yeah, we've been exposed to so many cultures just by being not out of our own culture.
So it makes it very difficult to convince all of those people's experiences to be false and that mine is real. So you have to believe mine. And so if you're willing to engage with people that, whether they look different than you, think different than you, because in America, you can look the same, but you can be from like East Coast and West Coast, it's very different thinking. And so you can think the same, but have a very different experience. And it would be, I lost my train of thought.
I think I understand what you're saying. It would be very hard to convince, say you take 10 people in Thailand that live in the same place, but that are all from a different place and have different stories, different perspectives, different experiences, different beliefs. Right. To try and convince them all to conform to one thought, to one system, would be highly unlikely. But if you take a community that all grew up together, that has a similar religion, that has a similar culture, it's going to be much more likely to get them all to think a certain way and to go a certain direction.
Right.
And that's what you see happening a lot of the time. Of course, it's not 100%, but that's
right.
A big characteristic of how toxic loyalty takes root.
Yeah, exactly. And so
one of the things you said, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
One of the things you said I thought was so interesting is people need to be willing. And now that's tricky because they're coercively conditioned to a certain system. So that's involuntary. That's on a deeper level of even a conscious awareness.
Sure. But
and I want to be careful because I want to be really trauma sensitive and abuse informed right now, because you don't know it until you know it. You don't see the system you're in until your eyes are open to it. And that often can take an outside source. If you're reading something or hearing something or someone saying, goodness, what you're saying just doesn't add up. I'm feeling some red flags about it. For you to be able to look more accurately at the situation that you're in.
To have a question of the system that you are engaging with.
Totally, like the fish who doesn't know they're in water, that type of thing. But also there is a small element, or there's an element, I'm not exactly sure how it plays in, but of willingness. So like you said, you get that group together of 10 completely different people with such a variety of thoughts and diversity, and they're not going to be willing to give up what they've experienced to be true and what they know as their value, they value, and their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be willing to do that. And yeah, I guess I just like to explore more. There's a willingness when this happens to us, but understanding all of it is driven from the trauma before the trauma and the vulnerability and susceptibility that we have to a system or a relationship like this.
Yeah, and I think the invitation is to be curious, to be open, like questioning your commitment, questioning your thoughts, questioning what you say, questioning what you believe. Doesn't make you weak or show that you're wavering. There's a strength in questions.
Yeah.
And so the invitation is just, no matter what you believe, why do you believe it? And what would happen? And even the question of like, what would happen if I changed my belief? What would shift? What would you lose?
Yeah.
What is the threat? Because if the answer to that question could tell you whether there's toxic loyalty or not.
Right. And the ultimate test is differentiating from the group.
And seeing what happens.
That is the litmus test. Actually, there's a quote by Henry Cloud about the litmus test of relationships is, does the group or the person only love your yeses? Because if they only love your yeses, that means they love your compliance, not really loving you.
Right.
So putting your no out into a relationship or a system and veering from where you're supposed to be will show you if there's toxic loyalty present or not.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do because
coercive conditioning.
Right. Like you said, there will be backlash.
Yeah.
There will be, if that's present, there's going to be fallout from that.
Absolutely.
And that is big. So we encourage you to have a good support system, separate from the system that you're questioning, separate from the relationship that you're questioning, a place to process, a place to really consider before you maybe put some hard lines down that may lead to significant backlash and exposure. Like you said early on, Luke, systems and people don't want to be exposed, and your compliance keeps them covered up. But your questions open it up to the light, and that's very exposing and very threatening. And there's going to be a reaction to that feeling.
Yeah. And there's things in place to make sure that they can shut you down.
Yeah. Quickly
and devalue your opinion, your question, your challenge, your boundary.
Yeah.
That doesn't invalidate what you're feeling or what you're questioning, the questions that you're asking. And so we're talking a lot about that toxic loyalty, and I think we have painted a good picture briefly, but a good picture of what that looks like.
Yeah.
So that toxic loyalty and that commitment, unwavering commitment, looks like a healthy commitment.
Yes.
Because I'm committed. I am not wavering. I have my all in. So that sounds nice. That sounds good. That sounds like commitment.
Yeah. Unconditional love sounds great.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about now the other side of healthy commitment. What is healthy commitment? What does that look like? And why would we encourage that healthy commitment and what are maybe the benefits here?
Right. I think the first word that comes to my mind that feels the biggest in that conversation is reciprocity. It's healthy commitment is two people or a person and a group, a system, I'll say, but for easy explanation, we'll say two people. One person meets and the other person meets there. And in that place of both meeting, both wanting the best for the other, both being willing to listen and to understand and attune and compromise, both sacrificing if necessary for each other willingly, consensually. This is healthy commitment.
Yeah.
It's two people being totally in. Does that mean 50-50? Sometimes it's 40-60, sometimes it's 55-45. Couldn't do the math there. But it's a pattern, a consistent pattern of equality and reciprocity.
Yeah.
And with that, intimacy, connection, really healthy attachment, secure attachment can be formed. That is the stuff of life, but that is the stuff of relationships when there's two people on the same page, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Are the needs being met or the value or benefits only one-sided? If it should be equal. It should be not one system or one person saying, you need to do this for me so that I'm happy, or that so that the system functions, so that it's like, if I'm giving to this system or this person to only make it go forward,
right,
at the sacrifice of my health, of my opinion, of my beliefs, of questions, of my intelligence, of my thinking, then that's not building you up. That's only building one side up. But if there's, like you were saying, that mutual desire to build each other up. So whether that's that system, it's like, if you've given to the system also gives back to you. Not just in relationship or being in belonging,
right,
but actually helps you develop and grow and fulfill your dreams. And that person, or if it's in a one-on-one relationship, as you're supporting the other person then comes around and says, okay, how can I support you? My needs, dreams, my desires are not the only thing that's important.
Yeah.
And it's a mutual giving and taking. It's not, and it's also not you give first, then I'll give every time.
Right. It's not transactional.
It's not transactional. Reciprocity is not transactional. Reciprocity is a choice to continue giving despite the other giving. But with reciprocity, like, because a lot, like, again, abuse and trying to be abuse informed and trauma informed, there's going to be a desire, you give no matter what. But is the other person giving? Right. And that's where you see that toxic loyalty or it's abuse.
Right. And I think the situations you're talking about are more like specific seasons where a woman has a baby and she's really not able to give much relationally, or she's not able to cook much, or, the things she normally loves you in, she's not able to do. But you don't just stop giving because, oh, well, she's on pause, so I'm on pause. That's not reciprocity.
Exactly. That's what I mean by giving no matter what. It's like not the transactional, but giving, in those situations where someone's sick, pregnant, just had a baby, transitioning,
in a hard season for whatever
hard season, right?
Yeah.
So there's nuance there, and so these aren't prescriptions. These are, again, invitations and conversation.
And I think that reciprocity in a relationship where toxic loyalty reigns supreme, I think that it looks like one person meeting in the middle and bringing their love, their attention, their care, their pursuit, they're trying to work it out, figure it out, all of that to the table, willingness, openness, and the other person coming to the table once in a blue moon, never coming to the table, running when the person comes to pursue, hiding, denying. There's so many ways that can look like in a relationship, but basically they're not showing up.
Yeah.
You're showing up and they're not showing up. And that means on an emotional level, there's no such thing as a relationship that's just a physical, there shouldn't be a relationship where it's just a physical, we eat, we're business partners, we live in the same house type of thing, maybe we have sex, but there's not an emotional reciprocity. While we would say there's no, that you're an emotional being. So that is missing out. There's a massive missing out in that type of relationship.
And that goes true for even a friendship. If you're pursuing somebody and there's never a pursuit back, then there's an invitation of like, maybe look at that relationship.
Yeah.
And maybe there's not toxic loyalty, but maybe there's pressure to pursue.
Yeah.
Like, well, no, they need to be loved too. It's not about me, it's about them. Like that is a toxic message because you do matter.
Yeah.
Maybe
the caveat to that would be, if it's not a friendship, but it's more of like a mentoring, like you're pouring into someone, maybe working with someone who's recovering from an addiction, and they really can't give you much relationally, but you have chosen,
right? There's choice
to enter into that relationship, knowing that it's going to be pretty much one-sided, but because you want to care for them and you have boundaries and you can get your needs met elsewhere. The same would be true with children. Our children are not intended to have the kind of reciprocity that we would have in an adult relationship. Even though we long for that, that's not their role, that's not their job. And so, there's these special relationships in life that we can look at and say, this is unique. This should not be a marriage.
Yes.
There is, I don't want to say no circumstance, but there's practically no circumstance where this is appropriate in a marriage, because that would just be abusive.
Right.
And very damaging to your soul as a person, to give, to show up, to meet needs, and to be left hungering and longing for more.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again, we mentioned like choice, agency, boundaries. Like if they have that mentoring relationship, you're choosing that I am entering into this relationship as a mentor or as a caregiver, not expecting my needs to be met. But if it is a mutual peer-to-peer relationship or spousal relationship, it's like there's an expectation that we are meeting each other's emotional needs. And if I give, you give. So that also means if you don't, then there's a choice of being in that relationship or not.
That's right.
And there's agency to choose and be empowered that this relationship is not meeting what we agreed upon or what I expected. And so either we redefine it and say, let's work on this and pursue it, or this is abusive and I no longer need to put myself in this position and this relationship to continue to be used, manipulated, taken advantage of. And so therefore I can leave this relationship.
That makes me think of how certain messages of like covenant relationship and unconditional love that we learn, many of us, especially in faith traditions, we learn these things from very early on. And it is, it's intentional, I believe, to create a very strong conditioning belief in marriage. And while there's beauty to it, to say it's a unique kind of love and it's committed and it's blah, 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 it's also really dangerous because we grow up believing that because I've entered into a covenant with this person and before God, I'm here for it.
No matter what.
I am gonna lay down and I'm gonna just take it because this is what I've decided to do. In a covenant, you don't break a covenant. And even the thought of an unconditional love. Well, I don't believe humans love unconditionally. Maybe your children, but even that, there are limits to. I will always love my children, but if my children decide to be harmful, abusive people, I will create distance there and I will protect other people from them. And if my children go to jail for murdering 10 people, this is a strong example. I'll love them, but it's different than what we think when we think of unconditional love. We think of still being in relationship and still reaching out and caring and doing all of these things. Well, I don't think that humans love that way. Maybe God does, but humans, we love conditionally, or we should love conditionally.
Yeah.
We should love based on what we're being shown. And like you said earlier, when we were chatting about this before we were recording, like with the updated information that I have, am I still choosing to love this person in this relationship in this way? Because people change and people could become more harmful, and a person that you don't want to continue to love in that way anymore. I'm kind of babbling. Can you jump in with any?
No, you're doing great, I think. Yeah, I think that choice means that with the information I have, I continue to move forward. And so whether it's a system and you realize, oh, there's new information, or I heard something new and I'm thinking about this and I'm not sure this fits in this box, I want to make another choice.
Yeah.
It's really important that as we get information within relationships, that we have a choice, and that a commitment or a covenant shouldn't supersede our safety, us being treated like human beings.
Right.
I
Being
mean,
in a relationship where there's reciprocity and
yeah,
connection.
and I'm having a hard time because there's just so many exceptions and trails to go down. My mind is kind of like going down all these different pathways of the importance of this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the lies that we get fed so slowly, consistently, that we don't like, it's like being poisoned slowly. Over time, we just accept it. Or, I mean, I guess it's a form of brainwashing, really. And just the importance of our desire is that people are in healthy relationships.
Yes.
And feel empowered.
Yeah.
To be in a relationship or to leave a relationship that is not healthy, because people are important enough and valued enough to be safe and to be treated well. And we see so much abuse, whether it's with a system or with a person, where people feel stuck and they don't know why. And so the hope is just an invitation to our listeners, as we've walked through a lot of these experiences, of just being able to question, being able to listen, and being able to set boundaries. Like you were talking about, like with kids, we can love them. That doesn't mean there's not boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody would agree that boundaries are good. But once we get into a certain relationship or a system, it's like, well, no, we don't put boundaries there.
Yeah, we justify why we're being treated the way we are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm misunderstanding. I'm human. I make mistakes too. They didn't mean it. That's not. They're good people. Look at all the good they've done. It's we give these reasons, but we want to just. We're not saying on a snap of a finger, just start putting up boundaries and leaving people. But we are encouraging to think about it, like to question relationships, question thoughts, question patterns, question systems that you are engaging with.
Yeah, and try and determine if it is more of a healthy commitment, or if it would fall into toxic loyalty. Not because you know, from an objective perspective, try to put yourself in a position of someone else looking in to the relationship dynamics, which is really hard because it's hard to think outside of our own subjective experience. But if someone else looking in would be like, wow, this is not a healthy, balanced relationship based on reciprocity and agency and choice and boundaries. This is not that. And you know what? If you're not sure, if you feel so confused as you're asking these questions, like Luke's saying, and being curious, bring in a trusted person to help you critically look through the evidence that's in front of you with eyes that are objective and aren't so in it, that haven't experienced the coercive conditioning, that haven't been slowly fed the truth about, quote, air quotes, truth about marriage being for life and family being for life. You can never put up boundaries with family because they're your blood, and blood is thicker than water. These things are culturally, religiously communicated since we were children, and they're very, very hard to go against. So bring someone else into your situation to help you see more clearly, because that extra set of eyes could be so life-giving to you. It could make such a difference in the clarity that you can gain. You can see this clearly, even if it feels like the foggiest, most confusing scene that you're looking out onto. It can clear, the clouds can subside, and you can see with really crystal clear clarity the reality of your relationships. And I wanted to mention the episode that we did with a friend of ours who shared her story. It is episode 5 of this season that we're in right now, domestic abuse and learning to live in reality. And hearing her talk about how much work it took to get to a place where she was living in reality, and then how she will not give that reality up for anything. That seeing clearly means so much to her now because of how much blood, sweat, and tears it took for her to be able to see reality.
Yeah. And healthy commitment can exist. Like you and I have a healthy commitment, but I also know that there's a limit to that commitment.
Yeah.
If I'm abusive, if I'm cheating on you, like you're like, sorry, I love you, but I'm not going to deal with that.
Right.
And that's healthy commitment.
Yeah.
I'm
and I
not
remember saying that. Let me just jump in real quick, because you just made me think of, I remember saying that as a young married couple. We've been married now for 16 years, but I remember saying that earlier on, because I was like this hidden feminist that I didn't even know I was yet. But I remember saying, like, I will leave you if you cheat on me. And I remember you like looking at me like, is she supposed to say that? And I was saying that thinking, am I supposed to say this? I'm not allowed to say this, but I believed it. And I knew it was right, even though it didn't click with what I heard about it being a covenant relationship, that you stick out and you work together no matter what. But exactly. And you to me, if I change, and if I become harmful and abusive and unfaithful and unloving, you have the choice to leave as well.
Right. And with that message, I'm not walking around saying, oh my gosh, is she going to leave me? When is she going to leave me?
Right.
And like, there's not an insecurity. Like that boundary doesn't make our relationship weak or insecure or fragile. it's like here's the boundary. As
Yeah.
long as you stay in this boundary,
Right.
we're great. We'll have a
Right.
great marriage, great relationship. We'll have reciprocity. But if you step out of this, I am telling you, I have a choice, and I will use that choice.
Yeah.
And so just sharing that, because it can be scary to feel like every relationship is on the verge of losing it, or you're leaving them, or they're leaving you. And it's like, that is scary. And like Lauren was saying, that Cloud quote, when you say no, people will leave you.
Yeah.
But that's not because you did something wrong or you just throw away a great relationship. It's because that relationship was really weak and it only depended on manipulating you. And so they didn't really care for you and love you. They just wanted to manipulate you. So yes, they will leave. Then there will be other people that won't, and those relationships will become stronger, and you'll have new relationships that will take the place of the relationships that left.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah.
And so there isn't this, there is I validate and affirm those fears and that maybe that gut feeling that just happened in your stomach as you're listening to this, or the tension, that is normal. But like Lauren was saying with that episode 5, our friend is not walking around as like, oh man, I'm just so broken. I can't believe I lost that relationship. It's like, I've never felt more free.
Right.
Because it wasn't a relationship. It was abuse and manipulation that was actually slowly killing me.
Yep.
And the toxic loyalty and the coercive conditioning was what was killing me.
Yeah.
Not leaving the relationship. Yes, that was hard.
Right.
But for different reasons. And like she said, she'll never go back and give up that freedom and that empowerment.
Yep.
Because there is healing and she's becoming who she always wanted to be, desires to be.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's empowerment here.
There is, and likely you question, well, what even is a healthy relationship? Because when you're in something, you're being told this is what will be a good marriage, this is what is a good friendship, or this is whatever. But we're just here to tell you, if you feel kind of in the dark about that, the healthy commitment side, like Luke said, is so freeing. When you have those healthy, clear boundaries in a relationship, you can love and give and show up in such a beautiful, free, willing, not obligation, just love. You can show up as your full self, which leads to the best kind of connection, the best kind of
Intimacy.
relationship. Yeah, intimacy in any kind of relationship, not physical, although obviously that also would be improved. But I just want to paint that picture of the healthy commitment side is the lines create the boundary lines and the clarity of this is that person, this is me. We have our own opinions, we have our own emotions, and we can choose to show up and love one another. That is so empowering. And if that's not what you've known, we get it. It's like very much counter-cultural in so many ways. So you haven't seen that maybe. And you're like, well, I can't even picture what that would be like. Well, we just want to paint that picture, cast that vision for you, that it's there, that it exists in friendships, in romantic partners, in families, in community settings. It exists and you can find it. And don't let yourself believe that you have to settle for this obligatory, lacking reciprocity, almost like servitude. Like I can't see it in better terms right now because my mind is just picturing like when you just have a relationship where you are obligated and forced essentially to show up and love them the way they want, although your needs aren't being met. It's like a form of servant.
And there's shame, and there's guilt, and there's fear, and
You're never enough. You could lose their affection in a moment's time. Yeah, all of that.
yep, that's toxic loyalty. And
Yeah.
the healthy commitment offers a beauty and a flourishing and a connection and an intimacy and not driven by guilt and shame of,
Right.
am I good enough? Did I do it right this time? Did I do enough this time? It's this, there's an acceptance of who you are is enough. What you think is good because you are good. Your brain is good. Your thoughts are good. But there's also that freedom to explore. Like, you may think something like, and I may not agree with it, but that doesn't mean that's wrong. And you may change your thought in three weeks, 6 years, because like new information. But it's not that, when there's that healthy loyalty, it's like, I'm not threatened by a difference of thought.
Right.
I'm not threatened. My relationship isn't dependent on agreements. And so there's not that fragility of that fear of like, what if she stops thinking that way or believing that way or saying those things, or then a relationship has to fall apart because of that. No,
Right.
there's that freedom to grow, evolve, change together, and even helping each other grow.
That's right.
Because I don't know everything. So I need people to come in and say, hey, this is my experience. Like, I only know what it is to be a white man living in the Northeast of America. That's my experience growing up. So for me to say that everybody has that experience and should have that experience and have that same information is just, it's prideful.
Yeah.
And so if I have somebody from Southeast Asia, from Europe, from Australia, from the West Coast comes and says, hey, this information is good. You should read this book. You should listen to this music. You should look at this art. You should think about this. I'm like, no, I can't. I don't have that information before. So therefore I cannot accept it. It's so limiting to your own growth.
Yeah.
And even if you don't take all of it, there's might be pieces that like, oh, that's so helpful to see it from that perspective, to understand it from that way. And toxic loyalty says you can't do that.
Right. And you're highlighting a characteristic we didn't say, rigidity.
Yeah.
Systems and relationships of toxic loyalty will be rigid and unflexible, immovable.
So hopefully you got to that part, because that was a gem right there.
That's good. Yeah, I love sifting through it because it's painting a better picture in our minds of this. So any final thoughts as we wrap it up?
I think that was a good,
that was
a good ending thought of just how not having toxic loyalty can help us even grow as people, because we can learn from each other and grow with each other and walk with each other and live with each other, instead of being afraid of who you're going to make me be and how that's going to ruin me. And it's just like, no, we're all on a journey and in process. And at 20 years old, I'm very different than I am at 36 years old. That number is starting to get a little higher.
It has a tendency to do that.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. But like, I don't want to be the same person I was when I was 20.
Right.
And so I would be missing out on the people that I've met and learned from in the last 16 years. The husband, the dad, the friend, the man I've been becoming the last 16 years. And so I don't want to stop here.
Yeah.
Like, I have not arrived. How could I think that I have arrived at 36 and how much I've grown in the last 16 years, that when I'm 50, I hope I'm not the same person I am at 50 or at 60. And at 60, I hope I'm not the same person I am when I'm at 70. The only way that I would be the same person is if I become rigid and stop learning and only learn from like-minded people who tell me to only do things one way.
Yep.
There's safety and convenience in that,
Mhm.
but there's not growth and healing and
Yeah,
adventure there.
right. So good.
All right. That was fun. It
That
was
was,
good to be
fun.
back.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you next week as we do
Oh.
this.
All
Well,
right.
it's been great having this conversation, and we hope it's been meaningful to you. We'll share it. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your questions about toxic loyalty versus healthy commitment. And we'll see you here next time for some more healthy, life-giving, growing content for your journey.